Welcome to The Truth About Ag. Welcome to the Truth About Ag podcast, where we are producers talking to producers about the real-time issues affecting the farm. I am your host, Evan Schout. I'll be joined by my co-host, Kristjan Hebert, as well as many other producers and experts to talk day-to-day operations. We are broadcast over multiple social media platforms, so like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. Now sit back, grab your Yeti or your beer, because it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Thanks for listening. Welcome to the Truth About Ag podcast. I am your host, Evan Schout, with your co-host here, Kristjan Hebert. And today's a bit of a one-off. So neither of us have prepped, and obviously you're in the middle of getting ready for seeding. So give me a little bit about this week and what you got planned going into spring session here.
Yeah, so typically we would start seeding the last week of April. The joke around here is it's usually Monday or Tuesday, which means I usually take a drill to the field on Sunday afternoon. But it's kind of trending a little bit ahead. We might actually start scratching a little bit this week, but the forecast is calling for somewhere around a half inch of moisture and then temps to cool down for 2 or 3 days. So this week's just kind of the last minute scramble of all the little things everybody didn't quite have on the list to get cleaned up. And we got our big team pre-seeding meeting tomorrow to go through with a bunch of the part-time staff. And then hopefully Monday, Tuesday, the weather works with us, and we'll flip to 24 hours within the first day of starting.
So give me a little bit more when you say pre-seed meeting. What does the farmer listening need to do for a pre-seed meeting if I'm working at Kristjan Hebert's farm?
Well, I think we just like everybody to be on the same page, and whether you have 2 people or 20 people, we find the little things don't always get communicated. So something as simple as we make sure everybody's apps are updated when it comes to Voxer for communication and My John Deere for all the work orders, and we got crop intelligence for all the weather stations. So we'll get everybody on the same page there. And then we've got manual seeding books as well as online ones that'll show what's going on every field and kind of our typical plan for what order we're going to seed in, who's on what crew, whether you're on a night crew or a day shift, and who you're switching off with so that you can communicate that and move your shifts around. And then all the little stuff, we actually run a whole crew in front of the drills, making sure the fields are completely ready, right from cleaning up a slough that we couldn't combine last harvest, to trees that are deadfalled into the field, to approaches that aren't wide enough. So that crew will run ahead. We kind of get all on the same page. And then even little things, lots of our temp staff do some of our rock picking. So, this year we're putting flags in My John Deere for all our rock piles so that a kid from New Zealand or Germany doesn't start making secondhand rocks. They're not a huge fan around here.
So I know Pattison's going to be out this week too. So what do you do from the equipment standpoint? Like, is this a learning and education on some of the new equipment, or are we already past that stage?
Yeah, we're kind of past that stage. Most of the stuff is stuff we've had already, but we'll pull the sprayer and the air seeder up. We'll also pull up our liquid tankers and stuff like that that's coming out to the field for logistics and the order we plan on filling the dry semis. But we'll walk everybody through recalibrating air seeders and checking depth and how to clean out sprayers and how to set the monitors. Pattison will go through all the monitors with everybody just to make sure kind of everybody at least starts on the same page. At least with My John Deere now, all the work orders, et cetera, are preloaded and all the prescriptions are preloaded. So it gets better and better every year to simplify it for the crew.
So I guess just a little deeper on that. So on the actual equipment side, so obviously I know we're running one newer John Deere drill this year. Any reason, I guess, we went away from Vanderstad, or theoretically why you're moving into green again?
Yeah, so when we first started expanding, we actually had Seedmaster and Vanderstad toolbars. We had a Seedmaster cart. We've switched completely to Deere carts. A couple reasons. 1, I like them. 2, they're simple. And 3, I find that I can negotiate with them better with the rest of our equipment, where a lot of air tanks and air drills can become boat anchors. So it's nice to include them in a tractor or a combine deal. So then we went completely to Vanderstad. Part of that reason was easy to get parts. We farm all around the plant. But what we're finding now is Vanderstad would lean towards selling whole units, and I really do want to stick with the Deere carts for now. So that's why we tried. That's why we flipped our oldest Vanderstad on one of the new Deere Masters, and we'll see how good it works. But I mean, we've grown good crops with Seedmaster drills too. A couple of neat things, we like that it's 3-inch air all the way through from the air cart through to the drill, which is one thing we always got to kind of hillbilly fix on the Vaderstat toolbar to the deer cart. And then everything talks to each other pretty well through all the technology. So it'll, I'm sure we won't see it from my truck, the two drills side by side, but at the end of the year, we'll see if there's any differences.
And I guess for anybody listening or watching, we don't have a picture of ours in the field yet because she's obviously a little bit wet still down there. But I know, shout out to Mr. Dimmler here.
Running pretty much the same unit we are, except with a little bit of liquid, right?
Yeah, we got a tow between liquid cart. Other than that, it's real similar.
And I think he went from Vaderstats as well. And I haven't had the conversation with him, obviously, but same theory, I'm guessing.
Yeah, like I said, I think they grow very similar crops. And so if you do like the deer carts, they hold their value pretty good. They're pretty simple. Nothing against the Vaderstat cart either. But for those of us that are deer, they talk pretty seamlessly throughout our system for data, and they hold their value and can become pretty easy to bring into one of our equipment deals that we're making on something that deer really wants back.
So, okay, everything's ready. Everything's in the field. What does day one look like? Mad chaos, or do we have a plan in place? I guess would be me leading you that question.
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of this week we'll take drills out one by one and get them set and calibrated and check every boot and make sure the depth's right. And so we try to not get in too much of a rush when we take the drills out and get them all ready. So a couple of our lead guys, Josh and Chad, will do that. I'll go double check on things. And then, by day 2, so let's call that kind of next Monday, Tuesday, if the weather works with us, we'll flip to 24 hours really well. So the crew kind of works together to make sure we got some of our more senior or long-term operators on each shift, both day and night. And the plan just kind of starts taking place. The lucky thing for us is some of our crew is pretty long-term. So it's not like it's a surprise to anybody, and every shift has some pretty senior crew on it.
Sorry, I was getting a bald reflection up here. So,
oh yeah.
Now, I know I'm looking for the most important question. So I know you started dryland training with your son last week. How's gym day number 2 or 3 gone?
I think we're up to about 6. We started at the start of, 3 weeks ago. The first week made me feel real old. Everything hurt, but it's starting to get pretty good now. I just got to be careful because he's probably within a couple of years where I won't be able to beat him at much. So right now it's still fun because once I get rid of the soreness, I can still beat him at everything, but I'm gonna have to be real careful.
So I'm guessing once seeding starts, that goes out the window, or are we freedom of time enough to hit the gym still?
Well, we're gonna see. I got him booked right up till seeding, and then it's kind of a unique situation. I mean, we're up pretty significantly, 70 some quarters, and right now I don't have a seat in a drill, which on our farm, I mean, seeding's the one thing I really enjoy, and so typically when we expand, I have at least a 12-hour shift on a drill, probably a lot closer to 16 or 17. So to kind of have our crew geared up, that I don't even have a significant spot on the drill will be a little interesting. We'll see if we can keep it up, and then maybe I can keep going with them. But if not, then I'll jump in a drill.
So that was going to be my question of how long before Kristjan Hebert needs to take out a drill, not is needed.
Yeah, probably as soon as I see other areas start to drop off. So the one we really notice is when we got to fire the sprayers up in front of before we start seeding canola. That's when you could use as many people as you could possibly have. So, I think you'll see me in it for sure by the time we get done. They get near the end of the cereals and we need to start up the sprayers. I'll probably run it some to free up people. And I don't know, I'm going to try pretty hard to not be out there quite as much as I normally am. It's every time I kind of let the reins go a little bit more and the crew has more autonomy, they always impress me. So it's my job to make sure the plan's in place and they know I'm available if anything goes really wrong, that I can come give a hand and I can fill in here and there. So we've always said we wanted to be a rover and be able to attack some pretty important projects that tend to come up in seeding that I haven't been able to in the past. So we'll see if we can actually pull it off this year.
So I don't want to keep asking you questions, so feel free to jump in if you have anything, but
Yeah, well, I mean, we can go down this seating one because I said we've talked about it quite a bit. Everyone, one of the number one questions we get is how much are you going to have to work with the new land, and how much new equipment did you buy? And I mean, we bought a little tractor, a rock picker, and a conveyor. We were able to finish seating last year in about 16 days. So in our minds, it's only 4 days, 4.5 days extra. The crew's geared up for it, and our team, specifically Jeff, but the team too, has done a good job of recruiting. I mean, we'll run 4 drills 24 hours, and we'll have logistics crews day and night, and we got 5 rock pickers running all the time, and we also got 3 or 4 people on the crew that's running in front of the drills. So I think the big thing is just the team effort on focused as we grow, that we have to do it right. And the hard part for me is sometimes I actually have to do what I said I was going to do. So but I mean, you and I both know I'm speaking in Calgary on May 7th, which I would have always said no to, and I think I'm in Regina on the 14th. And seating specifically was always a blackout period, right? Like harvest, I might sneak away once or twice, but seating I never left. So I think the processes just every year continue to get a bit better.
So as you go down that route, and I mean, my head went to it, and I know a lot of my clients' heads go to it, of why expand if it turns into that kind of HR chaos? And I mean, by HR chaos, obviously, if you're not ready for it, you got that many machines going, who's in charge of what? So give me the breakdown of how you've managed the expansions and how you manage the manpower. Because honestly, I don't think it's the capital part that scares a lot of guys. I think it's having 30 guys in 30 different locations, and you can't be everywhere. So how do you deal with that?
Well, I think that, the big thing was to get the top right. So, I mean, I was always reasonable at strategy and finance and kind of having a vision of where we want it to go. But the two pieces that have to fall out underneath that are, our operations and real finance, and then how we actually get all that done. So, I mean, the two key pieces were having people I trust right with me at the top. And so that was Jeff and you, and Jeff takes care of the execution on the farm, and you take care of the finances, which means that I can kind of do what I need to do every day and then pass off after I get done the little bit that I need to do, and you guys execute it. And I think that's the key part. I think a lot of farms I see maybe start adding a whole bunch of people, at the worker level. But if you have 30 direct reports, that's a real easy way to not enjoy your day every day. And unless you're Jeff, he likes direct reports. I mean, he had 100 unionized staff underneath him at Viterra. So if he has quite a few direct reports here, it's not near as difficult for him. But we've even started adding pretty significantly underneath Jeff. So I would say that we look at the farm more as a project management company. And obviously seeding's a big project, but within seeding, there's 2 different crews on the drills. So there's 2 projects, and there's 2 different crews on the logistics, and there's 2 projects. And there's the crew that runs in front of the drills, making sure the field's ready, and that's a project. And then the rock pickers are a project. And so every time you have a project, you got to have somebody that's going to be the project lead, right? So on the one drill crew, Josh will get the calls, not Jeff and not me. And then if they need us, they'll bring us. On the other crew, Chad will get the calls. Louis runs the field cleanup crew, so he's the project manager there. Dustin and Trav are on the 2 different logistics crews. And so there's your leads, and the rock pickers have a lead too. So we really try to break everything down into a project, and then who's the lead of that project.
So I guess you as managing partner, and I mean, I had the discussion with our last podcast guest, and he pretty much called it quits for this reason of he needed to be in charge of everything. So how do you let go, and how do you let them know what you actually need to be consulted on, or at least informed of, right? So, I mean, what's the level where the phone has to ring to you and not to Jeff or to somebody else?
Yeah, I think, the statement I use all the time is one of my mentors once told me, right, that if you put a good team together and you're driving down the highway, you want to let them go as fast as they can. And your job as leader is to show them where the 2 ditches are, and then get the rocks out of the way in front of them on the road. So that's kind of when they have to call me. So, I mean, we have our ditches, and our ditches would be around seeding order and how many acres per day I kind of expect. And so if we know we're going to be way off from that, I'm going to see it, or I'm going to get told about it, and we'll try to we'll try to fix it. But whether that's a drill went down or whether it's too wet, it's just so that we can adjust the plan to hit the outcome. And then the other part is we have a scorecard we look at every Monday. You and Jeff and I look at that, and it's kind of ever evolving. Like, it was more detailed. And I mean, just last week, the 3 of us went through that my scorecard needs to be a little higher level and be more about percents, of which then if I have questions that they're bothering me, the questions goes to you two, and you guys get into the details with the crew of what's going on. So I think every quarter I have to find a way to take, another step or two higher and look more at trends and processes and outcomes, and then push those either ideas or concerns down to the crew. And I mean, yeah, the hard part is, right, you got to trust the crew, and you have to understand that some mistakes are going to be made. That's the only way to learn. But I think what we try to do is after every major project, we sit down, once everybody's caught up on sleep, and say, like, here's the mistakes. Here's the things that went really good. Here's the mistakes. And when it came to those mistakes, was it a process or a person? And 9 times out of 10, it's a process, and we need to fix it, whether that be through communication or how we do things. So then every year there seems to be kind of less mistakes and less headaches, which to this day still surprises me. I mean, when you and I were in college, if we just said we were farming 40,000 acres and I didn't have to work any harder than I did when we were working 5,000, or maybe even probably work harder with my brain, but less hard with my body, I think I'd have said we were full of it.
Well, I mean, 5 years ago, I thought you were full of it when I came across. So, I mean, the first story that I think kind of turned me was the one with the dual falls off the air cart in the middle of the night and your phone doesn't ring because you're home in bed. So that to me is when I realized what the team could actually do without you, and have it up and running again early morning. I mean, that on a normal farm is a 2-day breakdown, and every person standing around trying to figure out how to fix it, right?
Yeah, I think, as you grow, but as you learn from those mistakes and process them, I think what you find is that less and less stuff becomes a big deal. Every problem you have is just who do we need here? It's kind of like our who, not how rule, right? It's not how am I going to fix this? It's who do I need here to help me get this thing rolling again? Because the outcome is X acres per day at this speed. We're not allowed to speed up. And so who do I need here to help? And so the duels is a good story. I remember when we first took on one chunk of land, and the owner came to run a combine for me. And after harvest, I said, like, what can we do different? Like, what would you bring up? And his answer was, we need to be able to turn on some light on the combine so that everybody knows I'm just stopping to take a piss, because I stop and there's 2 people on the radio asking me if I need something. And I just needed to get out to go to the bathroom. Right. And so I think the crews really got their head around that, the more you help each other and are focused on a single outcome versus just your project, the more successful everybody is. And yeah, we have numerous examples of things that I think would shut a lot of farms down for 6, 12 hours, 2-3 days. And, to shut us down more than 4 or 6 hours, it's got to be pretty major.
Well, and even, I mean, I've spent a few days on the grain cart down there at harvest because they trust me enough to put me on a tractor. But the big one for me was getting combine stuck. I mean, for us, that used to be get 2 4-wheel drives out, set it up. I mean, it was a 2-hour deal by the time you were done. And there's chains on the back of the grain cart. You back up, and within, I mean, I bet I pulled out 3 combines in 25 minutes one night. So, I mean, those kind of things I didn't realize until I became part of your organization was and I mean, it's all broken down to process. Don't get me wrong. And most guys will say process, you don't need that on farms. Well, I can prove that process leads to the efficiencies that I've seen even in the last 5 years.
Well, and I think it leads to efficiencies, but really what processes do is it allows your people to make decisions without you, because the process is the decision tree, right? And the number one thing you see bottleneck farms or any business, and I mean, I think, your last guest would probably talk about this, is that if your phone has to ring about every decision, what are we seeding here? Where do I put this grain bag? I mean, you're going to lose your mind, or your spouse or your kids are going to lose their minds. So, I mean, I have to admit my phone rings maybe 25% of what it used to a decade ago. Because a decade ago, I was still trying to feel important. Everyone had my number. I was kind of hoarding calls. And now, I mean, you've been in the meetings. Now it's like my team, specifically kind of you and Jeff and Louie, do everything you can to not give my cell phone to anybody. Right. So I take way less calls than I ever did, but it's just getting those projects broke down and who should talk to who, right down to who can order parts on the farm, so that we don't have 15 different people ordering parts. But then what we found out is, why are we ordering parts all the time? Why don't we just have our own, rail car on a trailer with all our parts we need for seeding, so that 90% of the parts we have on hand? Well, how do we figure that out? well, just buy what we bought last year and the year before. So every one of those little steps where I delegate, the team kind of finds efficiencies in it where I don't have time to look at each of those little steps.
So let's pull you out of seating a little bit. So I spent almost 3 days down at Mooseman last week going through year ends, and I mean, family farm dynamics. I love sitting with your parents. I love sitting with you and your wife, and obviously I sit with the crew as well. So I mean, give me a bit of the ideation of how it's changed over the years, of how those meetings have gone. Because I mean, I've been a part of them 5 years ago, and I can tell you we spent a lot of time looking at the past and what we've done. And I mean, last week I spent 10 minutes on what happened last year, and we spent 2 days on where we're going forward. So give me a bit of the ideation on that.
Well, I think, if you go right back to like '08 when I came home through to about, call it 2016, 2017, somewhere in there, that first kind of 9-10 years, I mean, I had some pretty crazy ideas for a crew, and specifically my dad, but everybody, my mom and my wife too, to believe it's actually possible. I mean, you've known me for a long time, and until you got here, you didn't believe it. Like I was saying, I think I can farm every new acre as good as my last acre as long as I have the right crew and processes. But for my wife and my parents and my crew to understand that, hey, everyone, like, I think your life is going to be more organized at 20,000 acres than it is at 5. They thought I was nuts, right? And fair enough, because we hadn't really seen it done too much in the world of farming. We'd seen a few back then, and so I think that first 8 to 10 years, there was a lot of looking back. What did we do the right things this year? Did it end up kind of the way Kristjan said it would? And if it didn't, why didn't it? Was it my fault for bad decisions or bad process management, or what was it? And now I would say, the ownership group and the crew is just, they're just kind of bought in that I don't always have the answer, but I do always kind of know where I'm going. And sometimes I need 4 seconds to make the decision, and sometimes I need 4 months, depending on how big it is. But just kind of trust me, and we'll work our way there. But here's the pieces I need help with, right? So here's where we're going. And then in those meetings now, it's a lot more about, okay, well, here's where I want to go. Here's how I think we can get there. And everybody buys in right away. Yeah, we can get there. And then we spend a lot of time looking at, okay, but what's everybody's role going to be to get there, right? And I even look, one of the kind of neat things last meetings was, I mean, gotta remember when we first expanded from 8,000 to 11,000, my wife was pregnant with our first. And I didn't even really ask. I got kind of called out in the middle of harvest, made the negotiation and made the deal, and went home and said, oh, by the way, we're going to expand, and you're going to have a baby right before seeding. And she thought I was a lunatic, but knew I was crazy from day one. And now this time, when we're talking about this expansion, I mean, she's laughing because she knew it was going to happen the minute it got brought up. We're friends with the people, and she just knew it was going to happen and that the team could take care of it. It's not going to take more of my time. But at the start, I mean, as I said, some of the ideas were a little bit crazy. And so we had to spend a lot of time picking the ideas apart, where I think now, like I said, everybody buys into the idea. And it's just like, okay, what's my role in that idea to ensure it's successful now? Because it's not just Kristjan. It's everybody has to do their piece every week and every quarter and every year for us to get there. And then we just look back. But I mean, I think with our weekly meetings and quarterly meetings, that's the time when we spend the time looking back and making sure things are going right and course correcting. We don't have to do it at year end anymore because we do it now every Friday or every 3 months.
Well, I think like coming across that I think was the defining moment for me. Was I was going back and forth. I mean, I was leaving MNP to go farming again, which most people in my life thought was insane. But I remember crop production show, your dad literally took me aside while you weren't around and said, make sure you're for sure on this. I mean, we want you here, but you got to make this decision for you. And I mean, he knows my family story. He knew everything. So that to me, I mean, we hear a lot about the big farms not being family farms and that whole narrative that they like to spin. Well, yeah, I'm not a Hebert, but from that point forward, I felt like I was. So I think people got to realize that even on the large scale farms, and I mean, even with us, how we're partners just as much as I'm an employee, it was about family from the start, and it still is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I don't know how to say it right either, but I mean, we're good at making decisions and we've got really good at dealing with awkward and conflict. So, I mean, I think probably in your time at M&P and in my time, what we saw was the majority of operations, anything that they knew was going to create conflict or create awkwardness, they actually waited. It might have happened in January, but they would wait till March of the next year to bring it up in your meeting with your accountant, with your business partners, whether that was two brothers or a brother and a sister or a brother and a father, right? It's like so that's 15 months of getting mad. So then it's turned into like a huge problem. And I mean, you can speak to it, but I've never really had a issue with conflict and awkwardness. I don't see them as conflict and awkwardness. It's just a question, that I'm going to ask, and we're going to figure it out, or we're going to take a break, and then we're going to go back at it and figure it out again. And Jeff, I think I probably handpicked Jeff a little bit for that reason, is he's kind of the same. He's used to it, and it doesn't bother him that he can keep talking through it with me. And Louis was always good at making decisions. Maybe not always super good with conflict, but he's got there. He's kind of got there the same way we are. And I mean, I remember you mentioning when you first came over, like it's goofy, or to be honest, it's fucking weird how we can just deal with hard things just every Monday or every quarter. And then it doesn't matter if people are upset or mad. You have a beer after, like it's done. It's decided. We move on. And I think that's one major thing.
And I mean, that was the funny part is, I mean, you're going to work with someone you've known for 20 years. I mean, I was in your wedding party. That's the awkwardness that people say you can't have. And to tell you the truth, I mean, you and I have gone a few rounds once in a while. You get over it, you move forward, and you just keep going forward, because both of us have the same thought in our head. Just because we don't agree on something doesn't mean that thought changes. We're both trying to look out for the best interest, right?
Well, as long as you're aligned on the outcome, you can have as much conflict and awkwardness as you want on the process to get there. That's actually why you want it, because you're both aligned on where you're going. You just might disagree on how to get there as a crew and as a team, but that's the whole point. You might as well debate it before you start going in two different directions and screw it up and have to learn through it, whether it's by making a mistake or losing money. But I find that too many people just skip that. They don't want to ask the hard question. They don't want to feel awkward. They don't want to be in conflict. And I just don't have time for it. So let's just work through it.
Well, and for me, it was more, I don't think you hired me or Jeff to be yes men. So if you weren't looking for a little bit of pushback on something, I'd almost be afraid, right? If I could honestly say, if you're CEO of a farm and you have staff and they've never pushed back on you, you probably have more problems than you even know.
Well, and I think, so really we just outlined the two ditches, right? Your one ditch is you have to delegate so you have time to work on what you're supposed to work on, right? Your other ditch is they better not say yes to everything, or you've just delegated to completely followers, nobody that wants to make you any better, right? So you kind of need both. You need both those ditches. You need people that want to come up with ideas to make things better and can have that hard discussion with you on why you maybe do it the way you do it, or the way there be better. Or most times it's a little bit of both your ideas, right? But at the same time, then you can't take control of that every single time and be the leader of it. And I think that's probably one of my neat parts of my job, is helping everybody through that, bouncing between those ditches, right? Because people will delegate and then they almost get worried to change the process because the people underneath them already have that process figured out. And let's be honest, most team members like process. They like things to be done similar. So if you make a change and then 2 years later, you're like, that wasn't quite right, we're going to go halfway back, then I get to help, you or Jeff or Lauren or Mariah or Travis or any of those crew at that level kind of work with, they're like, yeah, but I just got the crew onto this and now we're going to change it again. Yeah, but do we agree on the outcome? Yeah, we agree on the outcome. Okay, so then let's work through how we're going to make that change. And, I think we've all got to the point that we know that we really get excited about getting things done, doing things right, and to be honest, doing things that the world says that we can't do, right? We enjoy it. We're not going to hide that. And the whole crew thinks that way, which means that you're going to have to go through those situations. And there's nothing better, to be honest, at the end of a day, or I use seating that, when I go to sleep for my shift that I'm off, to get up in the morning and know that they hit their acre mark on that 12 or whatever hours and everything went close to perfect, but not quite perfect. And they made the decisions and they fixed it and they kept going. Like, you know what? That excites me. Now, do I have to learn how to not run a seeder every day and just the days I want to? Yeah, I got to learn that. But that's me learning how to not feel important. That is not, like, it is success when your team is that good. And so I got to get over that I don't feel is important running a drill, and what is but that me running a drill and seeding probably isn't the most important thing for me to be doing in May. It just makes me feel important, right? So you just got to navigate that.
Well, and I'm still, I mean, you tell me it's not, but I'm still going to pull it back to the guilt factor as well. I mean, I've got lots of farms that they'll get out of a drill, but they're still going to sit in their half done until 3 a.m. because they can't go, they can't go home to bed while their crew's still going. So, I mean, that I think is a pullback for most guys just as much as anything else is that they cannot leave because they have a guilt factor.
Yeah. So there's no question. I mean, you know this as good as me. When you first came over, guilt was probably my number one issue, right? And I would say in the last 5 years, it's probably an area I've matured a fair bit in that what I realized is that when I do leave, it actually empowers everybody that's still there. And they're proud that they can run it when I'm not there. And so by me feeling guilty and being around more, I'm actually taking power and their ability to be empowered away from them. And so it's a negative. So that's helped, that's helped a lot with me feeling guilty, kind of watching the team thrive without me there. So I'm slowly getting better at it. I'm definitely not completely recovered, but.
So I did pull your family back into a little bit. So I want you to give me the indication, because I got a lot of smaller farms, or not even small farms. I got farms that are successioning to the next generation. And how did Louis do it? So how did Louis not just trust you, but have the faith to give up some of his control for you to start, making decisions, running stuff, coming into it? And I mean, obviously we've gone full fledged, and I mean, he's still part of the leadership group and makes some big decisions, but how did he make that transition out? Because I always hear from the older farms that they don't trust the ones coming in, and the third generation always kills the farm and all those other things. But I also see it from the other side of how does the not exiting, but how does the farmer slowing down, how does he make that first move to get the next generation to start seeing some of the responsibility?
Yeah, I think what kind of goes back to Louis and I were always pretty comfortable having the hard conversations when they needed to happen. Now, did we maybe cross lines and go a little too far sometimes? Probably. But that, in my mind, that's a lot better than not having them and harboring when you're mad. So I think a couple key points is the succession from my grandpa to my dad was not good. It was virtually non-existent. So, I mean, Louis did have a comparison of what he didn't want to do. He also knew that he really loved farming, but parts of the business and the finance were starting to, be annoying to him. So that was an easy part for me to start taking over with my education. And then, I kind of go back to the way we have our equity calculator. And I mean, you've talked about it a lot. So, I mean, I believe every good business runs on three things: time, brains, and money, and who brings what to the table. And that's how our calculator figures things out. So, I mean, time is both labor and management. Who's doing what between Louis and I? And that's how we're going to get paid. So much an hour for labor and kind of so much as a bonus for management. And then we both get paid land rent on all of our land. And then we get paid a 5% rate of return on any equity we leave in the farm on top of land. And all that gets paid out before we start splitting profits. So, I mean, he knew that he was going to get paid for his work and for his equity and for his land before we started sharing profits. And the more profitable we are, the more money we both made. So we were pretty aligned on that. Obviously, I go through the kind of the first few years when we were 6 to 8, 9,000. Our big issue is we both like to be leaders or at least project managers, and we didn't have enough projects for us. So that's when we kind of butted heads the most. Once we got to about 16,000, I mean, I just realized I need lots of great people, and that my dad's one of them. And so which projects is he going to be in charge of? And I don't have any time to hardly check that over, right? If you have a question, phone me. But if you're a project leader for me, I'm a pretty trusting guy of the project leads, right? Set the project up and then get out of the way. And to this day, he has projects that he's fully in charge of that I just kind of look at the ditches and don't even bring it up. And if he comes to me if he needs a hand, and otherwise he just lets me know when it's done. But I think the equity calculator, and then let's be honest, as the younger generation, I did what I said I was going to do. Like, I didn't tell him we were going to make all this money and then not have any, cash that you can't even go to Tim Hortons, Louis, right? Like, we see too many younger generations make promises and not keep them to the older generation. They just kind of have an expectation that they should get some land rent free, or dad should work for free, or dad should just go straight into a rock picker. No, if dad doesn't like picking rocks, that's not his job, right? It's not your dad's job to make you feel special about yourself. Find things that you're both good at and do those things and be okay with everybody having their own project they're in charge of. And then, as I said, I think as the snowball started rolling down the hill and things kind of went the way we planned on my projects and his projects. And one of the big things was kind of me working on a bit of a network. He had to buy into that idea. That's just kind of how it went. And I mean, I think my dad's probably having as much fun farming as he's ever had in his entire life nowadays.
Well, and I think part of it is, like you said, he's in charge of the projects he wants to be in charge of. He's managing the relationships that he wants to manage. I mean, he doesn't want to be in a boardroom in Toronto. Let's be serious. He wants to be on an RM council. Well, maybe, but he wants to be local. So, I mean, he's still doing what he wants. And even when you interjected Jeff, I know the beginning was a little rocky, and for most farms it would be pushing a COO into a family farm. But even now, like I look at the two of them and how they work together and how they split resources, I mean, it is actually quite the thing to see. And most people don't believe they can get there. I think that's the big one.
Yeah. But I think, when Jeff came in, there's two pieces, right? Dad respected how good Jeff was with people, and Jeff respected how much experience and knowledge Louis had. And I think that's the number one thing, whether that's a father-son, daughter, father, mother involved, bringing in outsiders. You have to have respect of what the other person's strengths are, and you have to have agreement on the outcome you're trying to reach. Then you can have awkward on your way to get there. If you don't have respect and you're both trying to go in two different places, that does not work, right? So if dad wants to decrease in acres and son wants to increase in acres, I can tell you right now, you better fix that vision first before you worry about anything else, right? If dad wants to yard out every single dollar he has and not treat the farm as an investment, you better get on the same page on that outcome. Because, I mean, that was one thing Louis and I had in common, was that the farm is an investment. Yes, it's a farm, but at least if it's invested in the farm, we have control over it. If it's invested in New York, we don't. And being on the same page there, it is a big deal on why, we can operate the way we operate.
Well, I think a lot of it is, I mean, when I talk to you guys today, it's obviously I'm using your farm as an example in a lot of our farmer coach stuff, but it comes back as, well, yeah, he's there already, right? So it's harder for them to see where you came from, which, I mean, I can remember the days where Teresa and your mom were the ones driving combine and you and Louis were trucking. Like it still started at 4,000-ish or less acres. It just grew at an exponential pace, and you knew enough to have the right people in place for the growth. So, I mean, that's the thing that people have to remember. And whether it's your farm, whether it's Manette, whether it was Simmons that I've talked to, like, these farms didn't just start there. Like, it wasn't like, boom, they grew up and it was 40,000 acres. I mean, yes, there's farms like that there will be succession plans with those size farms here in the next 20 years.
Yeah.
But that's not how most of them started. Most of them started with 1,500 acres and a lot of risk and a lot of movement, right? Like it wasn't just easy button from the start.
Well, I think you go back. I mean, I think you were in the room. Simmons came down to visit us the one time, and I forget what Louis and I were talking about. I think I said we weren't going to fill a bin under 10,000 bushels. And Louis goes, oh, but what about those 5,000 bushel ones down those good flat bottoms? And Simmons looked at us both and said, quit thinking like 5,000 acre farmers. Now, I'm not using 5,000 acre as the number. What I'm saying is that every time you grow and every time you get more people, you have to look at your farm slightly different, whether you're 1,500 acres, 5,000 acres, or 50,000 acres. And if you're 1,500 acres, a 5,000 bushel bin's a big bin. If you're 50,000 acres, a 5,000 bushel bin's getting filled in 30 minutes. And so the fine line between perfection and logistics changes as you grow, period. And you have to be open to that and open that doing things the new way might be better. So you might, in our case, we're better off to sell our bins that are smaller than 10,000 bushels and either build more big ones as we have cash, which we do, or fill a grain bag and empty it by November, because we can't stop combines to keep moving the augers, right? So even little things like that, I think just kind of making sure everybody's thinking on the same page, goes a long way. And I think my dad probably thought as we were getting larger, things like land improvement and make sure the yards are clean would be things that I just wouldn't take care of anymore. And yet probably if you asked him, he'd probably say that we might do a better job of it now than we've ever done, but it's because we have good people and we have better technology to be able to do some of that kind of stuff. And we hire high school students to help keep up with yards and keeping equipment clean. but we're aligned on the outcome. The outcome is we want the yards to look good and we want the land to continue to be improved. How we get there is what we have to figure out.
Well, we're hitting the 40-minute mark, and I know you've got things to do, obviously, and so do I. So I want to thank you again. And again, like, share, subscribe, comment. Love the questions. So please put through a few questions for us. It makes this a lot easier when we shoot the shit like this. But that's the Truth About Ag. Thanks for joining us. The Truth About Ag podcast is a proud member of the Hebert Group, which includes Hebert Grain Ventures, Maverick Ag, and Farmer Coach. We appreciate the support. Lastly, please like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. And if you have questions for a future podcast, please leave in the comments below. Thanks for listening.